Hello, welcome back to our Bible lessons. Today we're going to begin to learn about Elisha. In 2 Kings 4, Elisha is the prophet of God that traveled with Elijah. God had told Elijah to find Elisha and tell him that God wanted him to serve him. And Elisha had obeyed and followed Elijah. Elisha also was with Elijah when God took him up to heaven in the whirlwind. Do you remember what Elisha wanted Elijah to leave him? He said, "Let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me." He wanted twice the power that Elijah had. And God gave him his desire. We saw that right away. He was able to use the mantle or the cloak of Elijah and part the Jordan River, just like Elijah had. Wow, God was going to use him. And we're going to find out the many miracles about that Elijah did with God's help. Wow. Well, our Bible lesson today is about a family. It's a mommy and two little boys. Their daddy had died. He had been studying to be a prophet of God, and he had died. And now the poor family has troubles. They're about to be split apart. Did you know that God can help families that have troubles? Well, we're going to find out they can. Well, their trouble was that they didn't have any food left, and they didn't have any money, and all she had was one jar of oil. You see, people in Bible times used oil to cook with, and they used oil in their lamps to see with, and they used oil for lots of things. Well, all she has is the one jar of oil. But now they have the really big problem. Oh, you see, they owed money. They owed money to a man that their daddy had borrowed from, and they didn't have any money to pay him. And the man said he'll come and take the two little boys to work for him to pay off their debt. Oh, that's the worst part of all. That's a bad problem, isn't it? Well, this lady knows just what to do when you have a bad problem. She said to the children, "Let's go see Elisha." Elisha is a man of God. And if we have troubles, we could go talk to our preachers too, couldn't we? And God can use them to help us. Well, the woman told Elisha her problem. "My husband, who feared the Lord, is dead. The man we owe money to is going to come and take my sons to work for him because we have no money to pay him." So Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in thy house?" And she said, "Thy handmaid hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil." And he said to her, "Go and borrow thee vessels," it means like pots and pitchers, "of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, empty jars, and borrow not a few." And he told her, "Go get as many as you can." That's what he told her. Get all you can. And then he said, "And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and thy sons." So he said, you got to go in the house and close the door and start pouring your oil into those empty jars and see what God can do. Well, the woman didn't think, that's a weird idea. She didn't at all. She obeyed. You know, obedience is the very best way, isn't it? She obeyed. And so they went back home, and they went to all the neighbors. "Can I borrow an empty jar? Can you give me an empty jar, please?" And they borrowed big ones and little ones. And as many as they could borrow. They went all around the neighborhood borrowing pots and jars. And so, as they went from place to place, and then they get back in home, and they had all these jars everywhere and pots. And then they did what he said. He said what? Shut the door. So they shut the door of the house. And then the Bible says that the woman began to start pouring her jar of oil into those jars. And the boys would keep bringing her another jar and another jar. And her oil kept filling those jars. I don't know how. And she didn't know how. But again, she obeyed what they told her to do, what Elisha told her to do. Well, she didn't know the answer, but she trusted God. And she poured jar after jar, and the boys kept bringing her more empty jars, the next one and the next one. And then she said to one of her sons, "Bring me yet another vessel," means a jar. And he said unto her, "There is not a vessel more." And the oil stayed, the Bible says. That means it stopped pouring. And the woman looked around, and she saw jars of oil everywhere. And then the mother hurried to tell Elisha what they had done. Elisha. Sorry, I keep saying the wrong one, don't I? So she went with her sons, and she went to find Elisha. And she said, "Okay, I've got all these jars of oil now. What should I do?" And you know what he said? He said, "Go and sell the oil and pay the debt you owe. So then that man won't take your children." And then he said, "And what's left over, thou and thy children of the rest shall live on the rest," he said. God did a wonderful miracle, didn't he? He helped this little family when they were in big trouble. Now nobody could take her boys away. All because the woman trusted God and obeyed him, didn't she? That's so important, to obey. Shall we sing that song and remember that we should obey? Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Doing exactly what the Lord commands, doing it happily. Action is the key, do it immediately. Joy you will receive. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Let's spell it. O-B-E-D-I-E-N-C-E. Obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Well, who helped this family? In the end, who really was it? It was God, wasn't it? It's God that does the miracles. That makes me think of the song, "My God is so big, so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. My God is so big, so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do. The mountains are his, the rivers are his, the stars show his handiwork too. My God is so big, so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do for you." God can help you and your family. Do you have some troubles with your family? Lots of families do. Maybe daddy lost a job, or there isn't enough money or enough food, or someone's sick. Well, the Bible tells us in 1 Peter 5:7, casting all your care upon him. Casting means to give it. Give it to God. Your care means your worries. And what's it say? For he careth for you. Did God care about this little family back in the Bible times? He sure did. Do you think God cares about your family? He does. Let's say that verse again. Let's see. 1 Peter 5:7. Casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. 1 Peter 5:7. Maybe you could draw some pots and color them, And remember this story. Because God answers prayer and God cares. God answers prayer in the morning. God answers prayer at noon. God answers prayer in the evening. So keep your heart in tune. Well, I'm anxious to hear more of Elisha's miracles that God did through him.